On this edition of SciTech Now, discover how a central New York man who used to be homeless is now redefining how we power our lives.
Honestly, I started waking up from dreams with the answers. What it became is an extremely efficient way to harness wind in more urban environments.
Then learn how video game skills translate to the real world. Hear from an author who thinks exploring Mars will help us better understand life here on Earth. And we see how scientists studied coral reefs in a time before scuba equipment. Coming up next on SciTech Now.
SciTech Now is made possible through the support of our members.
Mohawk Valley Community College. Your future starts here. Offering education and workforce development ranging from hands-on to high-tech, including nano, manufacturing, electrical engineering, and more. More information at mvcc.edu.
And by Giotto Enterprises, whose companies include Fiber Instrument Sales, The Light Connection, Molding Solutions, and Firmer Precision, providing solutions for fiber optic, telecom, molding, and CNC machining industries. More information at giottoenterprises.com.
Hello, I'm Simon Perez, and welcome to SciTech Now, our weekly program bringing you the latest breakthroughs in science, technology, and innovation here in Central New York and across the country. We start with a company in Auburn called Kohilo Wind. Kohilo is Hawaiian for gentle breeze. Now, the company's founder was passionate about clean energy, but it wasn't until he was homeless, living in the woods, that he was able to turn his idea into reality. The wind turbines you're about to see aren't like the ones in Madison County. These are likely to blow you away.
After some heavy family loss, a bad real estate deal, I found myself in the woods. You know, I took the little bit of money I had left and I bought a little place in the middle of nowhere. And I lived in a tent for a little while, and I learned what it was to be without, and I slowly built a little camp and gained more and more quality of life as I learned more and more about how to produce my own energy and control my own environment. I watched the traditional wind turbines in windstorms reorientate from the power of the wind just to redirect themselves into the direction of the wind, but the blades wouldn't spin. So there was enough energy in the wind to move the entire mass of the system, but not enough to actually get the blades moving, which are obviously the piece that produces power for you. So honestly, I started waking up from dreams with the answers as to what I have now. And what it became is an extremely efficient way to harness wind in more urban environments. So what we have here is just one of our little test benches. It's a very crude bench. So we just have the turbine, a couple circuit breakers, and I can actually show you the power from the turbine. So that shows you we've got juice from our turbine, and now we're running this little car. It's the first time in history that anyone's been able to take energy back out of a household fan. So with a traditional wind turbine, it needs, about 7 to 8 mile an hour wind sustained just to start moving. It takes about 8 to 10 mile an hour wind sustained to actually start producing power. For an urban environment, that's just not feasible. You have a lot of turbulent air, so it's very sporadic, but then you rarely have sustained winds above 15, 20 miles an hour. We use a very old, crude fan. The measurable wind speed out of this fan is about 2.1 miles an hour, and the actual energy being exerted by the fan is very minimal. So what we have here is the computational fluid dynamics. This actually shows a cutaway view of the diffuser system and shows exactly why our system works the way it does. You have a high velocity air coming across the low velocity, creating a vacuum that creates a vortex within the system. It also funnels the air directly into the correct side of the turbine, but it also amplifies that energy as it goes into the turbine. Similar to a hydro dam, taking that head pressure, creating a higher pressure as it hits the turbine itself. So what we have here is the fully assembled Cohilo Quantum. You have all the electronics fully installed. You have the battery system, dual supercapacitor banks. You have inverter, charge controller, rectification system. Here we have military connections. This chrome looking one is for the turbine itself. The green is for the AC out. We have another one for feeding back to the grid. Here we have our convenience plugs plugged directly into the cube. We have a light from the TV station, and simply plug in and we have power. And we also have almost no wind. The winds may be about 1 mile an hour at best right now. When I lived in the woods, I learned a lot about my own quality of life, what I needed just to be able to take a shower, just to have some running water, whatever it may be, you know, some light at night so I don't feel so vulnerable. But then as I developed these new systems, I learned there's a lot of people with much larger issues. You know, think about when Sandy hit. You know, these people didn't just go without power. They couldn't go to the gas station. They couldn't use their cell phones. No one knew. You couldn't communicate. That's one of the reasons I've designed these systems. And we've been watching companies all around us just leave. Not evaporate, but simply take the jobs overseas or, you know, into Mexico, wherever it may be. But they don't understand the damage that they do when they extract these jobs from our area. I mean, it's families that are impacted, not, you know, not the corporate bottom line. You know, right 2 doors down from us, in just a few months, they're closing the doors and 400 families are about to be without their main income. And we're simply looking to grow the manufacturing base here in central New York, and we're looking to be not only the future of energy, but hopefully the beacon of hope for this area when it comes to jobs.
The state is trying to promote clean energy in the southern tier by offering $10 million to green startup businesses that set up shop there. For some people who are passionate about video games have the reputation of being basement-dwelling slackers. But as you're about to see, one woman has figured out how to take joystick expertise and turn it into a real job.
Around the country, there has been a push in the tech industry to keep these jobs at home, including in the gaming community.
I was a semi-professional gamer for about 14 years.
I have like most of the consoles that are out. I'm very into PC gaming.
I've been gaming since I was about 4 years old, and I actually went to school for it, got my degree, and currently I'm working on my first indie project.
While many of these advanced gamers have a deep knowledge of computer and video games and their design, many have had trouble translating their highly developed skills into jobs in the tech sector.
There is such a huge gap between entry level and actually getting into the tech industry. That was my problem. I had all the credentials, but there was no actual bridge to get there.
According to the Entertainment Software Association, there are around 150,000 people working in the multi-billion-dollar U.S. gaming industry, a number that continues to grow. Majora Carter is an urban revitalization strategist in the South Bronx, New York, who saw an opportunity to bring some of these tech jobs to her neighborhood.
I'm constantly looking for ways to create opportunities for low-income communities to move into the real economy. The world is firmly in the digital age. So we started immediately to look for where are the pain points within the tech world where we can find a way to kind of make sure that the folks in our communities can connect and then build careers from that. And we found it in quality assurance.
Quality assurance testing, or QA, is the method by which a piece of software is tested to ensure that it meets design specifications. It is a crucial piece of the software development process, but over the last 20 years, much of this work has been sent overseas.
When we did our market research, there was a lot of dissatisfaction in the industry in terms of the product that they got back. And we realized we were the game playing public. We were their market, and if we could add value in terms of like the type of focus groups and market insights that our folks would just naturally give to a product, then we could not only test it, but we could also provide those market insights, which were incredibly valuable to our clients.
To fill this need, she formed Startup Box, a quality assurance company that would serve as a subcontractor to New York City game developers and provide entry-level QA positions and job training to members of the Bronx community.
We all know that QA is an entry-level position, but we're hoping that it's a foot in the door to the industry itself. It's something that, like, as a gamer, we covet. We want to get in.
To get off the ground, Startup Box hired a small group of testers and partnered with clients looking for game testing and customer service assistance.
During the day, this place is filled with half a dozen young testers, and what they do is they get a piece of software, usually a game or some other type of user experience product, and then they do bug reporting and steps to repeat to figure out exactly, is there anything wrong with this game, so they can so they can report back to the client to make better ways to fix it.
It's not the conventional office setting, but no testing pit ever is. But I think they're also gaining the opportunity to be in professional settings around people who are at higher heights in the industry that they aspire to be in.
Startup Box employees also get the opportunity to meet with the company's clients directly, allowing them to get exposure and to make contacts in the industry.
Currently, we're working with Two Dots, a game about connecting dots. I'm the go-between between Two Dots and Startup Box, so they'll hand me an assignment and I'll delegate it to the team.
So I think the client visits are effective for that, just showing that that ladder isn't invisible. It's definitely attainable, even from people who come from communities like this.
We have a minimal viable training, which is just essentially less than a day long, where we're teaching different types of pretty simple bug reporting software, and then the rest of it is just on the job.
This minimal training allows for many more people to come through the door.
We know that the type of work that you do in quality assurance actually provides a fantastic foundation for you to build your other career. Those are great skills and transferable to anything in life, quite frankly.
We're arming them with the experience that the rest of the world tells them they can't have unless they have a bunch of letters behind their name. We expect and encourage attrition. We want to make sure that they get picked up by other places.
Some of the employees have already made great leaps since first walking into the Startup Box office.
I recently got accepted to another school. So I will be transferring there. It's New York Institute of Technology for computer science. So the experience gained here working for other people has, inspired me to be that person.
It's right up my alley. I plan on heading up my own studios one day, so it's given me plenty of experience.
By creating QA job opportunities in the South Bronx, Startup Box has played an important role in the urban onshoring movement and has taken steps to bringing the tech sector to the neighborhood.
This little space became one of the most successful, even though informal community centers. Part of the important reason why we wanted to make sure that people could see us was that we wanted folks in the neighborhood to know that people who look just like them were involved in the tech economy. What we're doing is saying, you know what, we've got talent in our own communities. We're going to support and train and nurture it here. We are creating a position for ourselves that is integral to the tech economy.
One consulting firm ranked Syracuse among the top 10 locations in the United States for onshoring. Since the 1600s, scientists have been studying Mars, first with telescopes and now with rovers. The next step is to send humans to the red planet. SciTech Now's Hari Srinivasan spoke with a scientist who believes sending people to Mars could answer some of the most basic questions we have here on Earth, such as, are we alone in the universe?
Why is it so necessary, in your opinion, for us physically to be on Mars?
Well, there's three reasons to go to Mars. There's for the science, there's for the challenge, and there's for the future. Okay, Mars is the Rosetta Stone that's going to let us know the truth about the prevalence and diversity of life in the universe. Did life evolve everywhere where you had reasonable physical conditions? We now know that Mars had such conditions for 1 billion years. Did life appear there, or did it remain sterile? This is worth finding out, and how did it develop? And we're going to have to send human explorers to resolve that. Secondly, the challenge itself is of extraordinary value. Civilizations are like individuals. We grow when we're challenged, we stagnate when we are not. And a Humans to Mars program would be a tremendous positive challenge for our society, particularly for our youth. It would challenge every young person. Learn your science and you could be an explorer of new worlds. Out of that challenge, we get millions of young engineers, scientists, inventors, doctors, medical researchers, technological entrepreneurs. These are the kinds of people that drive society forward. We benefited enormously in this way from the Apollo program. It would be even bigger in our time because now the scientific professions are open not just to boys but to girls, which was not really the case in the 60s. It would pay us back 100 times over. And then finally, there is the future. Is humanity going to remain a single planet species, or will we have an open future, an open universe? Can we become a multi-planet spacefaring civilization? Mars is the closest planet where we can put that question to the test, and so we should.
It requires a bit of an infrastructure, and it requires also a mindset that's a little different, right? I mean, right now we seem, relatively speaking, as a people, complacent to just hang out on this planet.
Well, I think there's still plenty of people on this planet that are willing to take on new challenges. I think there's a fundamental human drive to go where we've never gone before, to do what's never been done before, to build what has never been built before. And this is exactly what NASA needs. NASA's adrift now because it has no goal. It needs a goal, and that should be Humans to Mars.
You know, someone might say, look, why not send more rovers there to figure out what has happened to the planet? Why send humans in an arduous journey? But then really, you're talking about the possibility of colonization, of long-term stay, not just coming back and forth.
Well, don't get me wrong. I'm all for rover missions, okay? I totally support them. I think we should have more of them. I'd like to see a rover mission every 2 years. But even so, the rovers are quite limited in their capabilities. You know, the Opportunity mission has been a runaway success. It's lasted more than 10 years now on Mars. The rover has traveled about 20 kilometers. A human could march that in a day. Okay, and not only that, while traveling, that human would be turning his eyes from side to side, taking the equivalent of millions of high-resolution pictures and instantaneously being able to respond to that data by leaning down and picking up an interesting rock, looking at maybe breaking it in half. This is way beyond the capability of robotic rovers.
So what's the role of private companies in this?
There's two levels of participation of private companies. One is as vendors to the federal government, and the other is as initiators themselves. Now, it's always been expected they'd be vendors, but recently there's been entrepreneurial activity, notably from the SpaceX company, Elon Musk, who has been, with a significant participation of his own money, developing space launch systems and other space systems much cheaper than is being done through the traditional contracting process. And with the help of this kind of hardware, it could make Humans to Mars much more affordable, which ultimately is the key question as to whether the government would be interested in doing it or not.
So if the financial hurdle is something that we can overcome, what are the social hurdles to colonizing a different planet?
It's a question of personal ethics. In other words, what is the good life? Is the good life one that is pleasant, or is the good life one that accomplishes great deeds? Some would prefer one, others would prefer the other. It's the old split between Epicureans and Stoics, but there's enough of us around that would think that a good life is one that does great deeds, that there are people that want to go to Mars and be willing to do it. If we were to colonize Mars, it would be a fundamental transformative step, as significant in a way as when humans first left Africa to transform ourselves from being a local species in the Kenyan Rift Valley, which is where we're native, to a global species living in all kinds of places that we're not naturally evolved for. We became a global species by developing technology. We can become an interplanetary species by developing technology.
All right, Dr. Robert Zubrin, president of the Mars Society. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
The head of NASA says the goal is to get humans to Mars during the 2030s. For many of us, summertime means trips to the ocean and sometimes scuba diving for a close-up look at coral reefs. In this next segment, we take you on an underwater adventure to one of the largest barrier reefs in the world, the Andros Reef in the Bahamas. Nearly a century ago, scientists used some pretty rudimentary technology to document the wide variety of life on the reef.
So coral's been around since the Cambrian. More than 540 million years ago, coral evolved. There are some corals, some of the black corals, these deep water black corals you get that just seem to live forever. So you can have a single organism that's grown for 4,000 or 5,000 years. It's amazing.
First of all, that diorama is very unusual in the sense that it's a two-level diorama, which I think is kind of magical. So on the upper level in the Hall of Ocean Life, you'll see a view of Andros Island as if you were on a ship. You can see the ocean out to your left, and you can see these big breakers breaking as they hit a coral reef. And then you get this wonderful lagoon, and you look across that lagoon to Andros Island. But that kind of masks this extraordinary cacophony of life that was taking place underneath the water surface. When that diorama was built, the research was done for it in the 1920s, and then it was installed in the 30s. At that time, we were incredibly a terrestrial species. I mean, people really didn't know anything about coral reefs. It was almost like images from the Mars rover. I mean, this was a place that no one knew about. They just couldn't even imagine what it was like. It must have been an extraordinary endeavor to actually carry out the fieldwork that was necessary to recreate this scene under the water in Andros Reef. It would have involved tremendous logistics. I mean, steamboat transportation, all of the scientific equipment. I mean, I think there's 40 tons of coral, which was actually brought from Andros to New York City to construct that coral reef. This was before scuba. So the only way they could really get down and draw it was to actually get down and draw it. And they had to have waterproof paints. And these guys, these artists, were going down there with their paintbrush and actually making these paintings underwater. That was phenomenal. I mean, that was like going to the moon or something.
Corals and jellyfishes and sea anemones, they all fall in the same major group, Cnidaria. They all have a similar body plan in a way, these radially symmetrical, which means kind of circular tentacles coming out. It's an animal, and they're multicellular, and frequently they live in colonies, and they can be either hard corals, which secrete a calcium carbonate skeleton. And you see these big brain corals, things like that, they all rely on the skeleton to grow and raise themselves up higher to get more sunlight, get more food, basically. Or soft corals, as you'll see in many places. If you're diving on a reef, a lot of times, especially at night, you'll see the coral polyps extended out into the water, and they're filter feeding. But if you think about the water off of New York or New Jersey, it's very cloudy. There's a lot more productivity here. It's a lot richer water. We don't have these tropical coral reefs here. When you go down to the Caribbean, the Bahamas, the water is very clear. There's not a lot of nutrients, not a lot of resources. So they rely on the dinoflagellates then that live within their tissues to produce the food for them. So via sunlight, they're able to generate food. And if you think about, that allows them to live in these very unproductive waters. The coral benefits and the dinoflagellate benefits. So it's a symbiosis.
Many corals, you'll have a male coral and a female coral. Others will be hermaphrodite. They're both male and female. But regardless, they produce eggs and sperm. You see these mass spawning of corals at certain times with certain triggers. And the triggers can be phases of the moon, temperature, often very subtle cues. But what happens is they all spawn at the same time. It makes perfect sense to be synchronized because you're just squirting eggs into the water and sperm into the water. And you want to make sure you do it at the same time so that the sperm and the eggs contact each other and fertilize the egg to produce a larvae. And it looks like a scum, it looks like a sludge, it looks like pollution. It's not pollution, it's fertilized coral eggs. And it floats on the water surface, and then the fertilized eggs hatch into larvae, and then these larvae are carried off in the ocean currents. And in time, they will develop and settle out of the water column, land very often on another coral reef, or maybe their own coral reef, depending on how the water currents are. Every time I go to the Andros Reef, I see different things. I mean, depending on what I've been reading about, what I'm working on, what interests me at the time, you look, you stand, and you'll always see something different.
That's it for this edition of SciTech Now. For more information on science, technology, and innovation, visit our website at wcny.org/SciTechNow. And join the conversation on Facebook and Twitter. Next week on SciTech Now, a cleanup job unlike any other in the country. What it took to bring Onondaga Lake back to life. Find out what's behind the computer science gender gap. Then learn about a new way to pay that might have us ditching our cash and credit cards. And what happens downstream when a dam releases millions of cubic yards of sediment into a river. I'm Simon Perez. We'll see you next week on SciTech Now.
SciTech Now is made possible through the support of our members.
Mohawk Valley Community College. Your future starts here, offering education and workforce development ranging from hands-on to high-tech, including nano, manufacturing, electrical engineering, and more. More information at mvcc.edu.
And by Giotto Enterprises, whose companies include Fiber Instrument Sales, The Light Connection, Molding Solutions, and Firmer Precision, providing solutions for fiber optic, telecom, molding, and CNC machining industries. More information at giottoenterprises.com.